Hi folks, Glen Mowrer here. Today we're going to do another episode of the Next Step TVSB, and this particular episode is going to focus on a subject we've done before called American politics. I try to look at some of the things about American politics that aren't part of the most popular, well-known, eventful moments. We talk about independents running for Congress, or people running for city council races, or in this case, we're going to talk about Jill Stein, a woman who has been the candidate for the Green Party of the United States and has run as presidential candidate in 2012 and is probably going to do the same thing in 2016. To discuss that with us, we were really fortunate to have the former co-chair of the National Green Party of the United States with us, and also a former campaign manager for Jill Stein's efforts in 2012, Ben Manski.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, Glenn.
Good to have you here.
Yeah.
You're probably the most knowledgeable person I know about third-party politics in America, and maybe first and second party too, but I know you've been involved with the Green Party.
Yeah, absolutely, for a long time.
Okay, and you're also involved with a few other organizations which we've done shows on in the past. Mm-hmm. And if people are interested in those shows about attempt to mobilize people into some of the more important social, political movements of the day, they can go and look at our previous shows. They're available on Ustream and YouTube. Google the Next Step TVSB and you can find some of those shows. So let's talk a little bit about, let's talk today about, this is like late January. Mm-hmm. The first primaries haven't run yet for the national parties. And things are still pretty early in the process. But let's talk about where the Green Party stands in terms of its attempt to get a candidate like Jill Stein known to the public, mm-hmm. and why should we know her? And tell us a little bit about just who is Jill Stein. I think that's a question that most people really couldn't answer.
Sure. Jill Stein is a very compelling person. She was our nominee in 2012. She comes out of social movements around healthcare, around peace. She is somebody who has really done a lot to build the Green Party in the last 4 years since her last race. And just to let those who are viewing know, Jill Stein was the second most successful Green Party candidate. Ralph Nader, as many know, ran in 2000. David Cobb was our nominee in 2004. Cynthia McKinney, Congresswoman McKinney, ran in 2008. Jill Stein secured 500,000 votes in the last election and really introduced and reintroduced the Greens to millions of people across the country. And she's been able to build on that campaign going into 2016. We can talk a little bit about that in a bit. But in terms of where she comes from, she's a Harvard-trained medical physician who has done some very interesting research around diet and health, and particularly around health for both very young children and the elderly, and who only in the 1990s, she's now in her mid-60s, came to activism. And it was around the campaign for single-payer health care in the state of Massachusetts, where she's lived for most of her life. She's from Chicago originally, but she's basically a Bay Stater. And she became a leader in that effort. She became the statewide leader in the fight for single-payer. And what they did was they
This was the fight in Massachusetts?
In Massachusetts. It was a statewide campaign to create the first single-payer system in the country.
And they did that.
And they did it. They won. They went through the legislature first. They couldn't get the Democrats in the legislature. Remember, it's a one-party state pretty much in terms of the state legislature there to do it. So they used the ballot initiative process. They put it to a vote. They won. And then what happened? The next year, the Democrats in the legislature came back and they nullified what the voters had done. And that made her extremely angry. And she's a very, one of her great strengths is that she is not a person who thunders and roars. She is a very direct, calm person who really connects with people. She's got a good bedside manner, as they say about doctors.
We have somewhere in the back room there, you might get a chance, put up the photograph of Jill, a campaign photo, so just once in a while put that up on the screen and we can, there she is, I don't know if we can see it.
Oh yeah.
There's a campaign from 2012, or is that the current one?
I think that may be
so
a photo
hard to
from
see.
2012. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, if we can get that in front once in a while, that'll be helpful too.
Yeah.
Anyways, so go ahead and tell
Yeah.
us about this woman. And one of the things I saw, if I can just describe,
Go ahead.
I
Yeah.
understand she has a lot of academics and medical history.
Yeah.
There's something here in her material about being a national semi-finalist for the Musicians Magazine Best Unsigned Bands.
Yeah, she's a great singer t's She's
So
got a
she's
band. You can find. I have Google alerts that come up, and at one point I said, "Jill, Walmart's selling your music." she was a little upset by that, but yeah, she's also in a folk rock band and has been for many years.
Well, I didn't know that about her.
She's got diverse talents.
So that's good.
But she decided that if you couldn't get single payer through the current system, you had to change the system, and so she became involved in the fight for public finance elections in Massachusetts. And one thing leads to another from there, and that was 15 years ago. She had not been involved in electoral politics before. This experience, and so when she joined a political party, it was the Green Party. She never was a Democrat to start with, even later in life. She just had basic values that she found in the Greens, and she became a candidate for governor. She was very well known as an activist already at this point. She ran against Mitt Romney, debated him. You can see the Boston Globe declared her the winner of that debate. And has been involved in building the Greens and building movements for universal health care and for democratic society since then.
Well, that's, I do think it's important that people understand that there's, sometimes there's a willingness or a sort of tendency to believe that a person running for a office is basically not a real person.
Right.
They didn't come up, they were manufactured and put together, and maybe sort of adventuresome or opportunistic or something else. Mm-hmm. But when you see a person with this kind of background who came up actually working for political reform that we would appreciate, single pay health and better ballot access and all that, you got to admire that.
Yeah, and she's motivated, she's ambitious, but it's not the kind of personal ambition you see with the major party candidates. Mm-hmm. It is an ambition for her children. I know her sons. And it's the same motivation that most people who are involved in social change work bring. It's not about personal aggrandizement. And I've worked with many people over the years, and I've managed lots of campaigns at lower levels. And she is one of the most humane people I've met.
Okay, we had on the screen, and we'll go back up again, it'll come up again, I'm sure, the Jill 2016 email address. If people go to that address so that they can find out what the campaign is currently up to. There it is, jill2016.com. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you're aware of what they're doing at the very moment by moment kind of event, but I'm sure that there are events around the country. I know there are fundraisers, and they're trying to do ballot access. So that's an important thing.
Sure.
You don't just show up and get on a ballot. People have to understand that. Mm-hmm. What states is the Green Party likely to have ballot access clearly, and what states are in question, and what can be done to facilitate more people having the right to choose a Green Party candidate, and especially a presidential candidate?
Right. Well, the number one thing people can do to expand your right to decide who is elected to office is to support Jill Stein right now, right. To go to the website, to make a donation, to volunteer. She's in a good position for being on the ballot nationally going into this election. That's a result of prior work. So she began the year, assuming she wins the Green Party primaries, so I should be very clear, the Green Party has primaries, we always do. Last time around, Roseanne Barr was the major sort of opponent in the primaries, and that was a difficult race because Barr has a lot of money and name recognition. But Jill Stein won it through primaries, just like the other parties have, except for without corporate money. And this time around, the same thing. So there are other candidates running. A Californian's running, Daryl Cherney, who is an Earth First activist who's sort of well known in environmental circles from Redwood Summer back in 1990. And a number of other candidates are running in that primary. But I think it's safe to say she will win the primaries.
Within California, she's running. These candidates are running, or they're running
nationally. So there are a number of states where the Greens have statewide primaries. California is one of them. Massachusetts, D.C.
I know because I was in one of those California primaries as a candidate myself at one time.
Yeah.
But I think that we should make a moment's clarification. There is confusion about this idea in California that we no longer have party primaries.
Right.
It's like the top 2 primary system, but that does not apply to
It does not apply in the presidential primaries.
federal offices,
elections,
and people need to understand that. So if you're not registered green, you can't just walk into your polling place and decide that you want to vote for the Green Party candidate in the upcoming primaries.
In the primaries, right, which will be in June.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But so if you have an interest in helping choose this candidate, think about registering green.
Right, and you can go to gp.org, short for Green Party, to find out about all the candidates who are running in this race. And I do think it's important. I'll be voting for Jill Stein in the primary because I want to make sure that she is our party's nominee. She's by far, in my opinion, the best candidate in the race. Assuming she does win the party's nomination, the next step will be to ensure that she is on the ballot across the country. And going into this election cycle, the National Green Party already had ballot status in 20 or 21 states. I think it's actually was increasing. And those states included some of the most important states in the sense of electoral votes, in terms of party growth, and some of the most difficult states, California, New York, Texas, to get on the ballot. And so that's a big plus, right, that she doesn't have to get on the ballot. She will be on the ballot in these states. So they are working on ballot access in the other states right now. They are, there's a whole calendar to petitioning to get on the ballot. It's important that viewers know that there's a double standard in terms of election law in this country. The Democrats and Republicans wrote the ballot access rules after they were already on the ballot. So they basically wrote the different rules for the other parties, and we have to deal with those rules. It means getting, in some states a few thousand signatures, and that can be done with volunteers. In other states like North Carolina, you need 90,000 valid signatures. In Oklahoma, I believe it's 120,000 valid signatures. And so that becomes a very expensive proposition.
Signatures of voters.
Of people who are qualified to vote.
So that's a sizable portion of the total electorate of that state, I would think.
Right. In Oklahoma in particular, I don't know if it's 5% or something.
Sounds more like 10%.
That might be 10%.
I don't know. It's a large number.
Yeah. I have. We last time around, we just wrote Oklahoma off. We said we couldn't do it. Yeah. We were successful in getting on the ballot eventually in 37 states, including some very difficult ones, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and so on. So I think she will be on the ballot in at least 40 states, most of the states, and the vast majority of the voters will have the ability to vote for her, assuming that she's able to continue to raise the money and get the support that she's already getting. There's a lot of excitement around her campaign right now.
And besides Jill Stein's candidacy, there are other candidates running for other offices.
Yes.
Each state would have a different number of candidates. In California, we've had candidates running for governor and attorney general and local, all statewide offices in general, and the presidential in the presidential years, of course. What do you see as the issue that is most difficult to overcome relative to getting greater acknowledgement by the general public of the positions of the Green Party, the value of those positions, the appropriateness of supporting these positions versus the major two parties? What do you think is, what is the next step needed, to coin a phrase, to break through to the idea that there is some public, people have a personal interest in seeing this happen? Right,
right. Well, I think that there are so many hurdles that have to be overcome for anyone who wants to seriously reform the system, to actually have a political revolution, to borrow a phrase, to really do it. That in the end, the biggest challenge becomes for individuals to decide that they are going to take that next step, to return to the next step, to sort of join in with the long-term strategy of political reform. So what that means is that right now, as we're talking and as somebody at home is watching this on the screen, the challenge is actually for them to go and look at Jill Stein's website and to introduce themselves to what she stands for, what the Green Party stands for, and to decide whether they are going to make a short-term tactical decision, which might be for Jill Stein. They might say, my tactical decision in this election is to vote for Jill Stein because I want to send a message right now. I hear people say that. Mm-hmm. That's fine. I agree with that. There are other people who make other tactical decisions. They say, I'm too scared of this candidate or that candidate, and I have to stop them from getting in office. I'm not going to vote for what I believe in. I'm going to vote against something. But there's also a strategic question, which is the long-term question, which is where does this leave us in 4 years, 8 years, 10 years?
Okay, let me stop you there.
Let's invest in that.
Yeah, I think that's a good moment to stop. Okay, 8 years ago, Barack Obama came on the scene. Mm-hmm. Obviously stole a great deal of wind from the sails of the Green Party. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think it's
sure. It was a very difficult election year.
Very difficult election year. Here's a man who speaks of the things that the Green Party, in many ways, thinks of things the Green Party would admire. Mm-hmm. He was against the war. Talked about social justice issues.
Talked about single-payer health care.
Talked single-payer health care. Wanted to get rid of some bad trade deals that we had talked about.
Yeah, he said he was against the TPP.
And NAFTA and all this. And so it was easy, and also he had a symbolic purpose. Mm-hmm. He was a, potentially the first half-black American to become president, and that was important. And there was, anyway, so that is, we saw what happened from that.
Right.
I mean, there's a lesson to be learned there if people will pay attention. The 8 years of Barack Obama's presidency did not bring about those things.
Right, right.
And so they could have voted for Green candidates with probably the same net result effect.
We'll never know. The counterfactuals, right? We'll never know. But the question, actually, I would say it wouldn't have been the same net effect. I would say if the Green Party had been stronger in that election year, then you would have seen more growth of the Greens lower down on the ticket, too. And that's what we have seen since 2012. Actually, the Greens have been winning elections in major cities. We have some very exciting candidates running now as well. Margaret Flowers running for Congress, nationally prominent peace activist. In Maryland, Shamako Noble, who's the founder of the Hip Hop Congress here in California, was Green Party's nominee. He's endorsed at least by the state party for U.S. Senate. So there are very positive effects when you have a strong Green Party presidential ticket. And those effects carry over not only for the Green Party, but they carry over for all of us, because what happens when you elect Greens to office is that you have people who are not beholden to anybody except for you. They're not taking corporate money. They're not playing the career game. They're not climbing the ladder in the easy way. And so you know that when they get into office, they're willing to do everything it takes to get paid sick leave for workers in your municipality, to take on Chevron, as the mayor of Richmond, California, has done, to get the first living wage and municipal minimum wage ordinances in effect, to establish food independence, at the local level, to go climate, to go neutral in terms of the effect on climate. So carbon neutral. So those are the types of things that happen when Greens are elected to office.
Thank you. A wonderful summary.
I'm passionate about what I see Green elected officials
very
doing.
Concise and a great summary of that, and I appreciate it. The story I was trying to get to in the last commentary was that now that Barack Obama is out of office, I would think some of those considerations that people had about, well, I really can't vote against Barack Obama. I just want to support him.
Right.
And he does promise to do things that maybe he didn't do, but I promised to do, and he maybe even tried to do, and he couldn't do.
Right.
Now we're going to come up to a new election cycle, and pretty clearly we're going to have a fairly centrist, at best, Democrat.
Yeah.
I think Hillary Clinton is going to win that, and Bernie Sanders has got some wonderful things to be said, and I wish you'd recognize he was probably more of a Green than a Democrat, but that's that. So it'll be Hillary Clinton almost certainly, and I can't believe that the Democratic Party will ever let Bernie Sanders be their campaign.
Right, you heard it here from Glenn, folks.
And it won't happen.
That's right.
It won't happen.
So we'll see.
Yeah, okay.
I think you're probably right.
I'm going to put that on the line.
That's right.
And secondly, I don't think Donald Trump would ever be the Republican nominee either, but I'm not as certain about that. That would be crazy. But anyway, if we have to choose between, let's say, Cruz or Rubio and Clinton, I do think it makes it a lot easier to go back to the dissatisfaction I felt when Bill Clinton was president. And I watched the Democrats become the new Democrats, and do all this horrible banking reform, quote unquote banking reform, where they undid consumer protections and they engaged in all kinds of corporate tax breaks and incentives that helped the wealthy and didn't help. So I'm saying now I would think is a good time for people to understand that looking at the Green Party is
Smart thing to do.
It's a smart thing to do, and it's important to have an option.
Mm-hmm.
Have an option from the centrist corporate politics.
Yeah, I mean, who likes being taken for granted? If you don't have a strong Green Party in the United States, you're taken for granted. You have no real power at the ballot box because you're operating, when you go to vote, you're operating within a system where all the rules have been written by the people who already run the system, and they're going to constrain your choices. So you do end up with what I think is likely to happen in this primary season for the Democrats, where superdelegates, where corporate domination of the media, where the huge donors. I mean, Hillary Clinton right now is off doing fundraisers with Wall Street, 2 of them, $1,000 a plate on up. That's the way in which they literally do rig the system.
There's no doubt.
You don't want to break out of that. You have to do it yourself. You're the one who has to break out, and Jill Stein offers an opportunity, a great opportunity to do that. She's a serious candidate.
And another, so the next argument that we hear is, well, you can't vote for Green Party or any other than the major 2 parties because that might throw the election to the other side. I've already made the argument that it wouldn't matter that much, and I think when we saw what the difference between someone, Bill Clinton and George Bush, and I don't know, I just don't see a big difference. But the other point is that there are the people who are voting and I remember writing a letter to the LA Times to this point that when I voted for Ralph Nader,
right,
it wasn't that I didn't vote for Bill Clinton,
right,
or Gore.
Right.
It was that I wouldn't have voted at all.
Right, right. That a lot of people would not vote, or and surprising to some of us who don't come from Republican backgrounds, but analysis of the 2000 election showed that 1 in 6 of Nader's voters would have voted for Bush, and 1 in 3 would have voted for Gore, and as you said, half would have not voted at all.
Not voted at all, and I think that's
true.
To try to get a greater participatory effort in American democracy is critical. You hear Bernie Sanders talking about it. Certainly Barack Obama understood it, and that's how he got his coalition, he got his voters out. But that's aberrant.
Right.
And part of the reason it's aberrant, I think, is because the voters don't see that the 2 major parties offer anything for their specific complaints or problems.
Right, right. It's definitely true. I mean, voters are not as stupid as politicians think we are, right?
They might as well stay home.
Yeah. And something else I want to raise too, since we're here in California, and maybe people can hear it in my voice, but I'm from the Midwest originally, from Wisconsin, so I grew up in a so-called swing state, if you're somebody who actually thinks that your individual vote is really going to matter in the presidential election, and I think it matters in some respect, but the chances you're going to decide the election are smaller than winning that huge lottery a couple of weeks ago. The reality is you live in California. This state is not going for a Republican if you're afraid of a Republican getting elected. So if you live in a state like California, which, by the way, most states are like California in this respect, it's going to go one way or another if we're being realistic. You are really doing yourself a disservice, and your children, if you have children, a disservice if you don't vote for Jill Stein and you don't build the Green Party in this election, because there's no excuse. There's no excuse. You have Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. They're not going to win the state. We have an electoral college. We should get rid of the electoral college, but we have it, and that's the way these elections work.
Exactly. 4 years ago, I was comfortable voting for Jill because of exactly that dynamic. I'm in California, and the chance of Mitt Romney winning California were nil. Yeah, that's right. So it was very comfortable to do.
Not even a question.
And I felt morally compelled to do it. I thought it was a good statement of support that the people should understand. Some of us are looking at alternatives. Now, with a few minutes we have left, I want to speculate just real quickly on, another argument is, well, the Green Party will never become anything. It'll never blossom. It'll never become competitive with the Democrats, the Republicans. A lesson that I think people should remember is that where the Republican Party itself came from. I don't think most Americans have their history much in their head. But the Republican Party was non-existent 10 years before Abraham Lincoln was president, or 12 years, something like that.
6 years.
6 years.
It was founded in 1854.
Well, we found it. They were beginning their little anti-Whig movement. They were, you know, they were in the Whig parties and other dissidents in those parties. There's no reason to think that if the Whig Party, which was one of the strongest of the two parties in the United States at the time, disintegrated and fell apart and collapsed, and the Republican Party became so strong that within 6 years of their first convention, I guess it was, they actually had a president in the White House.
Right. Right. And the other thing we need to remember, too, is that it's not necessary for the Greens to win the White House in order for us to fundamentally change this country. So there are many states in this country that in the lifetime of people who may be watching have had 3 or 4 parties that vied with each other. My home state was like that for a long time. So you had the Progressive Party and the Socialist Party and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party at it. New York had that. Minnesota had that. And so building the Green Party through Jill Stein's campaign, bringing the visibility, getting the message out, making a statement, you know, is important, because what it'll mean is here in California and in Oregon and in Maine and in Wisconsin, where I'm from, that will strengthen the Greens in places where we can build a real base of support and show leadership.
Well, I'm not saying that there'll be a Green Party president in 6 years. I'm just saying that there's no reason to think that the lessons of the past are not going to be repeated.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
They are.
In fact, the opposite. It would be ridiculous to think that the current system will remain in place forever.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I'm watching the Republican Party, especially the Republican Party right now, self-destruct.
Yeah.
I think it's self-destructing. Donald Trump is no more Republican than you and I.
Right.
You know, and then you look at some of these people, these religious people who are not really political at all. They're just religious zealots. You look at the others who have other agendas, and I don't know how they're going to keep them together in the big house. You got the libertarians,
right,
and you got the corporate Mitt Romneys, and you got, you know, so I don't know. I'm just saying that
and
it could
remember,
well be.
they're only 20% of the population.
That's right.
You know, so we all this attention.
So reorganizing
for these guys, and they're only 20% of the population. What about the other 80% of us?
If we can motivate the rest and get them reorganized and reformulate, take people from each of these parties, put them together in a coalition, you might find it. We're about to end up on the show. Thank you for, I hope, an interesting conversation.
Definitely.
Jill 2016 is on the screen right now. Anybody who's interested, please go online and look at the information about Jill Stein and what she and the Green Party have to offer in the coming elections. Thanks, Allie, and thanks, Juanita.
Thank you.